Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for the Expanse Season 3, Episode 3, Assured Destruction. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of the Expanse, so I'll have to start with a spoiler warning for the Expanse up to Season 3, Episode 3. If you haven't seen up to this point, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. However, this video will not contain spoilers from the novels. However, I will have a spoiler section at the end of the video for those who have read the novels, but I will give a proper spoiler warning before doing so. So this was a pretty interesting episode. Mostly is what I'd call a setup episode, as it's establishing the setting going forward. I wouldn't say it doesn't push the story forward, because it definitely does. It just didn't have any tentpole moments in it. Although we did get the epic coming together of Holden, Avezarella, which was fascinating to see, as well as finding out whatever happened to Kotiar, which has some pretty interesting implications for things to come, as well as Aaron Wright and Anna fighting for the influence over the most powerful man in the system. But let's start with Jules Pierre Mal on Io with Dr. Strickland. This storyline took an unexpected turn as we see Mal cozying up to May, and as soon as I saw this, I knew exactly where they were going with this, as Mal ends up calling off the project. But I actually thought this was handled really well by showing Mal's look when he sees a picture of his dead daughter covered in the protomolecule, and then juxtapose that to his interactions with a little girl who obviously reminds him of his own daughter, and it really drives home how his daughter's death has affected him and makes him unwilling to use children in such a way. And I really do think it works. In the past, we've seen Mal make excuses for what happened to his daughter. In fact, he used his daughter's death as an excuse to keep going, as he said that she couldn't have died for nothing. But it's one thing to order the theoretical death of thousands of strangers from a distance, and a totally different thing to see innocent children who are right there in front of you being tortured and used in experiments that will kill them. It does show that Jules Pierre Mal does have a conscience and can no longer fool himself when the truth is staring him right in the face. Dr. Strickland, on the other hand, is obviously a sociopath with no conscience whatsoever, and it was interesting to see that contrast. For example, when Jules Pierre Mal mentioned it was good that the children could play together, it's obvious he meant because it makes them happy. But Strickland simply said, "Oh yeah, it is good, it helps the protomolecule spread." And Strickland, of course, was not at all pleased with Mal's decision to end the experiments, as he has no concept of a moral compass. But I liked how Mal silenced his protests by saying this isn't a debate, making it clear that he's in charge and that he's made his decision. So this makes it unlikely that Strickland will be able to change his mind, which makes me wonder if Strickland will kill him or find some other way to bypass him, maybe even going to Aaron Wright himself. It brings up some interesting possibilities that I can't wait to see. So we learn the fate of Kotiar, as he was last seen on the dropship with the tech Theo, and we learned the ship did indeed survive, but then was picked up by the UNN flagship, the Agatha King. And so Kotiar killed Theo because he knew Theo would be very susceptible to interrogation and wouldn't be able to keep the truth hidden. And this was a classic, look at the flowers moment. As soon as he told Theo to calm down and breathe, I knew his next step was going to be to kill him. I had said in a previous video that I hoped that Theo didn't die, but I liked this, and I think it made a lot of sense. It was a fitting end to this character, and I love how this affected Kotiar, because it was very obvious that he didn't want to do it and that he felt genuine remorse over killing him, but he knew Theo would break, so the mission was too important. When he talked about how Theo died to Suther in Win, where he said he was a good man, it was apparent to me how much he genuinely regretted killing him, and in fact, it haunts him, and that makes him a really interesting character. So we get introduced to the Agatha King and its command crew. Its commander is a character that's been around since the very first episode, but one who hasn't had that much screen time, and that is Admiral Suther. Suther was the fleet commander in the first season and someone who was very much against starting a war and so didn't get along with Avezarella or Ehrenreich, although he was never really aware that Avezarella's warhawk demeanor was just a facade to throw off others, and that Ehrenreich was his true enemy, but hopefully he's starting to realize this now. At the start of Season 2, he resigned as fleet commander in protest rather than carry out an attack on Mars's moon Deimos. Avezarella had criticized that as a foolish mistake, stating that he would have been able to do more good in a position of power, and I can't help but feel how right that she was, and that is really coming back to bite him on the ass now. Because his replacement as fleet commander was Admiral Wynne, a bloodthirsty warhawk who is fully allied with Ehrenreich, whom we see came on board the ship as his superior. So had Suther not foolishly resigned, he would have been Wynne's superior in this situation, so I'm sure that he's really regretting it now. So Wynne clearly is working with Ehrenreich, so is trying to kill Avezarella, but when Suther asks if he could go with him to question the prisoner, I think Wynne agreed because to refuse would raise suspicions, as he has no real legitimate reason to say no. But what Kotar was saying obviously got through to Suther and made perfect sense because he had worked with a lot with Avezarella and Ehrenreich and knew the type of people that they were, and knew that the official story didn't add up, and what Kotar was saying made sense. So I love how we see how devoted the crew is to Suther, as he's able to communicate that he wants some alone time with Kotar in a very subtextual way, but they know him so well, they know exactly what to do. So it's interesting seeing this back and forth and meeting these new characters. And of course, when Suther does go to chat with Kotar shoots straight with him, because no doubt Avezarella knew that he could trust him. In fact, when Avezarella is on the Versanote, we see her ask to send a message to Suther, so it's obvious that she knows that he is her natural ally. And it does appear that Suther does indeed believe Kotar, that Ehrenreich is the one working with Mal, and that Wynne is working with Ehrenreich. But it comes too late, as Wynne, who's caught on to the fact that Suther has this secret meeting, relieves him of his command and takes over as the commander of the Agatha King and orders them to go to Io. Likely it's to take possession of the proto-molecule hybrids, so this indeed is a very bad thing. But now at least we know that Suther knows the score, and that Suther has many in the UN fleet that are loyal to him, which is illustrated in these scenes in this episode. So this brings up some really interesting possibilities. So back on Earth, we see Ehrenreich come up with a plan to destroy all of Mars's bombers that could possibly send missiles to attack Earth. However, the plan will only work if they destroy all 5 ships at once. Gillis has doubts, but Ehrenreich is able to talk him into it. However, when Gillis confers with Anna on his next speech, Anna makes it very clear that what he's doing isn't God's work, and that what he really needs to do is minimize the loss of life on both sides. So Gillis then changes his mind and orders that they stand down on the attack. However, when this happens, Ehrenreich confronts him again, and this time with a very manipulative speech about how this is his defining moment as to win the war and push humanity further united in order to deal with the proto-molecule on Venus. So this wins Gillis over, who orders the attack, but one of the weapons delays, and then so one of the Martian ships is able to get a missile off before it's destroyed, and fires a missile which destroys a large area in South America, destroying a city with a population of over 2 million people. The Earth's defenses were unable to take out the missile because they stalled after being cycled down and then cycled up again in a short time frame. So Ehrenreich naturally blames Gillis for the attack, saying if he wasn't so indecisive, this attack would have never occurred. Which is complete and total horseshit, because if Gillis never changed his mind and didn't buy into Ehrenreich's bullshit, then the attack wouldn't have occurred either. By attacking Mars, they're just asking for a counterattack in response. So it's really Ehrenreich's fault, but Ehrenreich is such a master manipulator that he's able to spin it to make Gillis think that it is his fault, because he is such a weak-willed individual. So Ehrenreich is no dummy. He knows that it was Anna who persuaded Gillis to stand down, so he correctly identifies Anna as his biggest obstacle in controlling Gillis. So he goes directly after her, trying to make her believe that it was Gillis's fault, and by default, her fault, that millions of people died. However, I think Anna is smart enough to not fall for Ehrenreich's bullshit, but it is true the loss of life will weigh heavily on her conscience, unlike Ehrenreich, because Anna actually has a conscience. Something that Ehrenreich proved last season that he does not have when he betrayed Avezarella, and I think he proved that Earth's well-being is not his chief interest. His own lust for power is. And I think Anna's the type of person who is smart enough to figure this out, but we'll see how this goes. So finally, let's get to the Versanote. Yes, I'm still calling it that. Where we see Bobby Draper get really pissed off at seeing the Martian flag defaced. If you recall in Season 2, this was Amos's doing after he heard the news that the Martian moon had been destroyed, so he erased the destroyed moon from the flag. This was also really pissed off Alex at the time. The two of them nearly came to blows over it, which of course Amos would win. But at the time, Amos was going through his own personal issues, and him doing this was just a way to deflect what he was going through. But of course, Draper doesn't know any of this and just challenges Amos. Alex tries to defuse the situation and points out that they just saved her life, but Draper doesn't seem to take kindly to being dictated to, and states that since she served on the Dollinger, to which the Versanote was assigned to, it makes that ship more hers than theirs, which is quite a stupid claim, and they make it clear to her that her attempts to take the ship would be futile, and then her and Amos get into a pissing contest, which Alex again tries to defuse, but she then directs her anger towards him. So I'll just come out and say this. I didn't like this scene. I think Bobby was being incredibly obtuse. I understand her uneasiness around the Versanote crew and her hesitance to trust them, but claiming that the ship was hers and threatening to take them all out, excuse me, but they just saved your life. And then when Alex points this out, she says, "Oh, I called the MCRN, not you," which is a bullshit thing to say, because the fucking MCRN didn't respond, did they? The Versanote did. And I don't buy that she would be this thick-headed to the people who just saved her and Avezarella's life, something she should be incredibly grateful for, but whatever. Anyway, I do buy her interactions with Holden a lot more, as soon as he appears, her demeanor seems to instantly change when asking about how Avezarella is doing, but she was being a bit more reasonable with him. But still, he denied her and made it plain that he wasn't willing to help them or change his plans of going to Io, and he basically says if they have a problem with that, they can just leave. And this actually makes a lot of sense to me, and this would be his attitude. And I like how when Amy tries to convince him that they should get involved, all he says is, well, if they don't use the ship to leave, you should use the ship to leave. Which was pretty freaking harsh, but totally understandable considering what she did. But it just goes to show how drastically the relationship has changed, because at the end of Season 2, Holden confessed his undying love for her and said that nothing she could say would change that, and then all she had to say was that she gave the protomolecule to Johnson, and now he's telling her to leave. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this is a bad thing, quite the opposite really. I totally buy this and I think it's a fascinating character turn. So this leads Naomi to doubt herself and think perhaps she should take up Holden's suggestion and just take the stealth ship, or the racing ship, to Tycho. She even goes as far as to plot a course. At the end of the episode, she says that she stays on board. The reason she stays on board the Versanote is to stop Avezarella from getting the protomolecule, but I don't think that's true. I think it has more to do with her interactions with Alex, which I loved, by the way. First of all, we get the really heartbreaking reply where Alex's wife replies to his message where she says that she's glad he's still alive, but that she and their kids don't need him anymore, and is glad that he found something else that he loves more than them, because they're basically not going to be in his life anymore. Really harsh and heartbreaking, but I can totally see where she's coming from, and I think Alex can too, but it doesn't make it any less heartbreaking for him. So that just hits home to him even more that the Versanote is the only family that he has left, and so he reaches out to Naomi, a member of that family, to try to keep the family together because he noticed that she was contemplating leaving, and so makes it clear how much he admires her with that scene in the mess hall, which was a really touching scene that I thought worked amazingly well. So I think this has a lot more to do with why she stayed. So anyway, we finally get the interaction between Avezarella and Holden as he checks up on her, and as expected, Avezarella is a lot better at politicking and tries better tactics to get to Holden and convince him to help her out, but ultimately is just as unsuccessful as Bobby was. Avezarella tries to appeal to his vanity and sense of heroics by complimenting him on the Eris incident, and when that doesn't work, she attempts to appeal to him on the dangers of the protomolecule, to which he just laughs and says that she sounds just like he used to. So finally she brings up that she met his mother when everyone else thought that he was a terrorist, and when he met her, she knew better and realized that he was a good man. But that doesn't work because Holden just insists that he is no savior. So later on, Avezarella then rightfully realizes the only way forward is to just cut through all the bullshit, so she comes completely clean about everything she knows about the protomolecule hybrids and how Ehrenreich plans to use them to lay waste to Mars. I love Alex's reaction when she mentions this, because you can tell how desperate he is that he really wants Holden to listen to her, because that really got his attention, the possibility of Mars being wiped out. However, Holden responds in kind by showing Avezarella footage of the hybrid that's stowed away on their ship, and their discovery that Io is the base where the hybrids are being made. Of course, this is where it comes clean that Naomi gave Fred Johnson the protomolecule, and so Avezarella agrees with Holden's plan to eliminate all traces of the protomolecule to try to convince Holden that they are on the same side. So we know that they are on the same side and that they do indeed want the same things, but it remains to be seen if they can work together and trust each other. I certainly hope so. And in the event, there's now a rift between Naomi and Avezarella, as Naomi thinks that Avezarella just wants the protomolecule for herself, which I think she's wrong about. At least I hope she's wrong about, because it would go totally against her character if that was the case. And for that matter, I don't really understand Avezarella's reaction about Johnson having the protomolecule, because in the previous season, Admiral Suther convinced her that Johnson was a good man, and she went as far as to trust him and give him information on the protomolecule. But in this episode, she keeps going on about how the OPA can't be trusted and that good belters would be better off without the OPA, which seems to be her facade speaking, not her. So is she putting on a facade now, that the I hate the OPA facade, or did the writers just write her out of character? I actually think it's the latter, but I don't know, we'll see. So in other words, I wasn't a huge fan of that scene between them, but in any event, the stage is set, and I'm absolutely dying to see where they take this relationship between Avezarella and the Versanote crew but we'll see. So my rating for Assured Destruction out of 10 is a 7, very good. A fascinating setup episode that has me really excited to see where things progress from here. There were a few clunky moments and characters acting out of character, but for the most part, fascinating journey which show an interesting battle of wits between Anna and Aaron Wright, and a surprising change in heart for one of the show's worst villains, Jules Pierre Mal, and the tentative partnership between Avezarella and Holden, where we'll see how well this holds. So a lot of fascinating prospects, but nothing groundbreaking in this episode. So that's it for my spoiler-free section of my review of Assured Destruction. Be sure to check out my live discussion with Abkin Tomko and Darren from D's Reviews this Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the U.S., which is 11 a.m. Monday morning for me here in New Zealand. As we further dissect and analyze this episode, a link to that event will be in the description below. Also, be sure to check out my channel for many more videos on other shows like Star Trek, Game of Thrones, Babylon 5, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching. However, for those who have read the books, you can follow me to my spoiler section for this video, which begins now. So on the topic of spoilers, I mainly have questions, as the show is changing things up quite a bit from the novels. Like, I was really puzzled at first when they revealed Suther as the commander of the Agatha King, which was Wynn's ship in the novels, and of course it's a ship that gets infected with a protomolecule while Holden has to go on board in order to get the codes from Wynn to detect the other hybrids. I still believe that will happen, but it seems like the show is getting us used to the ship first before the horror show happens, which is actually pretty cool. So we will already be somewhat familiar with the ship by the time it's overrun with vomit zombies. So the big question I have, though, is in the novel, Suther commands his own little fleet that stands up to Wynn's fleet. So will he do the same here? Because he's just been relieved of his command, which means he'd have to take control of another ship in order to do so. I still think it's possible, or maybe he just commands a fleet from a different ship, maybe the Versanote, but he's not actually on the fleet that he's commanding, he's just commanding it from a distance. That's a possibility. It seems apparent to me that they are foreshadowing Suther joining Avezarella's side, but in what capacity and how closely will this resemble what happened in the novels still remains to be seen. Also, speaking of unexpected turns, not expected Jules Pierre Mal to have a sudden change in heart like that. This totally goes against his book character, who never wavered and was defiant to the end. So it does make me think that perhaps he will die in the show instead of simply being arrested. And perhaps Holden will somehow be involved in his death, which is what will get Clarissa set off on her path of revenge, but we'll just have to see. Anyway, that's all I got for spoilers this week. I'll catch you again next week.